Hello and welcome to another episode of Escaping Samsara podcast. I am Nathan Thompson. I'm joined here by Susie Sweeney. Hi, Susie.
Hi, Nathan. Nice to meet you.
Yes, and you. Susie, would you share with us the first spiritual experience you remember having?
Um, my first, if I can call it spiritual experience, or my deeper questioning started quite early in my life at the time when I used to go to bed and closed my eyes and thinking, where am I going when I closing my eyes? So I was always on a path of deeper questions since I'm very young. That's what I remember.
So, what was that like when you were sort of trying to figure out to yourself, like, where do I go? Did you come to any conclusions at a young age? Did you have a
Um,
sense of where you'd go?
so it was playing with that state of really deep letting go, um, because the day was always I get quite easily overwhelmed stimulation. So I needed a focus to stay. And at the time, I wouldn't have phrased it that way, but to keep my nervous system regulated. So at night, I was really playing with that, lying in bed and feeling my body in the bed sheets and thinking that I had now had to go to sleep could bring up some anxiety in me and thinking, where am I going when I now let go, close my eyes? And and I think that anxiety started very early in life. So I feel like I lived with anxiety through my entire childhood. And when I came to my teenage years, I developed an eating disorder that was basically not even about food. It was about the anxiety again that was underlying everything that I couldn't quite understand. And my parents, I remember seeing a psychologist, and she was trying to talk to me and asked me about food habits. And I didn't really feel, I always thought, what does she want to hear from me? And then she put me into a yoga posture. She put me into the warrior posture. And she said, what are you feeling? And to relate through that aspect of feeling, something clicked for me. There was a sense of safety because I could trust myself that what I was feeling was real. Whereas when she was asking me what I was, going through, I couldn't really put it in words and just was trying to fish. So I couldn't really understand the whole process. And that teenage years was quite dark for me. My mom went into a nervous breakdown, and I moved out with 14, and the feeling my body, I knew something in me, it felt safe to feel my body. And that's when the path started. I then did a Shivananda 1 month yoga teacher training in Austria when I was quite young. And then I watched the demonstration with Radha and Derek in Hamburg. And they had the practice place in Greece. So I was so taken just watching them do a demonstration that I then went to Greece and volunteered there and practiced. And from there, it just went on. Then I had a physiotherapist because I had a very strong scoliosis and I was playing the piano and had a lot of back pain. And the physio, again, had a son, Peter Greve, who spent many years with Patabi Joyce early years. So she said, my son's just come back from India. He's going to show us some sun salutes. We did some sun salutes. And then I decided I needed to go to India. There was no question. It was just, I need to go. And I bought a ticket and I went to India. I was 2 years in Africa before, but this is about the yoga path. So then I went, when I was 19, I went to India and met in South India. I met Peter Sanson. He was teaching there, and he said, come to Mysore. We're all going to Mysore. And so I went to Mysore. I did a little bit of yoga with Pete in South India, and then I went to Mysore, and basically on off went to Mysore for 3 years, always 6 months on, 6 months off. And that's where I met Matthew, I think, on my second or third trip as well. Yeah, so that's where the journey began. And I was always knowing that I needed to do this. There were so many tears coming up in the beginning when I started practicing. And I felt it was just stripping something. And I don't think it actually ever really stopped for me. It's still the same. I feel the safest if I can move into my body and start feeling. And without having to give meaning to what I'm actually caressing with my breath. So just staying with sensations, caressing it. And for me, it was always a very deep meditation.
Wow, that's a cool thing. Like lots of things to explore there. I mean, one question that comes up, like if you were to go back to when you were a little kid and you were sort of wondering where do I go when I fall asleep, right? Like if you were to like if that kid was to ask you now, what would your answer be?
Hmm. I think it's to explore the fear of the unknown. So not knowing what to meet when you let go deeply. And I don't think there's an answer with one. It's more exploring the path of that, not knowing and being in peace with that, because I still feel up to this day, and the way how my teacher Mark challenges my practice now, I'm constantly touching new spaces of not knowing what happens when I allow myself to go there. And often when I come to something new, there is this initial anxiety again for a moment, that initial fear, or my breath changes or my sweat changes. And then when I actually touch it over and over again, it can all settle. And I'm just caressing something that gives deep, it brings space. It's spaciousness, deep space. Yeah, that's what I would
Wow.
say. You go into a deep space, more unknown, more falling.
Mm. Well, that's really cool. I mean, and also the thing about feeling safe in your body, that's something I relate to because I wrote an article about this, and I will probably post it again on the Substack Sue, where I wrote it when Trump was first elected in 2016, and I'm not like going to go into like political opinions because this was a long time ago and things have changed now. But anyway, back in those days, you had this kind of decaying of like truth institutions, like institutions that used to tell you like, oh, this is the truth, this is what we all agree on, and now like no one has any clue and we still don't. And I found that the yoga asana was very useful because I was like, okay, I can trust my body because I know this is true, right? No matter how crazy and confusing the world is, it's like when I'm doing an asana and I'm feeling whatever I'm feeling, I know that's true, right? And so that gave me a grounding in a sort of uncertain time. So that is that how it works out for you? And you also mentioned the feeling of safety, didn't you?
Yes, it's trusting that I can. It's almost the path of not looking that life's going to get easier, or maybe not even looking for anything, but it's definitely not looking for this final resolution. And when I stopped looking for life to get easy, then something sort of again could relax into the peace. There's a sense of peace, even with not knowing, even with feeling more spacious awareness. And often in that real spacious awareness, there's a deep calm. So,
Mm,
but again, it's not looking for the deep calm. It's more looking, dropping the discriminating or softening the discriminating mind of that creates anxiety, that creates the fear, that chases the comfort and moves away from the discomfort. I think that's definitely the path for me, and it always needs to be refreshed. I can't say sometimes I don't. I feel like sometimes I feel like I'm always touching. Yeah, I'm never finished. I'm never there. But after when I practice and I touch these moments, then there is that trust. I know there is that bigger body of spaciousness behind all this. So today I had a practice, and this week was quite challenging, and my mind gets very busy spinning, and I can watch it being busy, but it's still busy, and my body then starts to be a bit more achy when the mind gets busy. So I've watched that correlate, and so when again I'm encouraged to move beyond what I think my body can do, and I just move with deep focus, and then I feel it settles the vata energy, that energy that is so that has so much movement. So the grounding, the apana, the prana that grounds me to the earth really gets settled through posture. So my mind needs me to move into my through and into my body for it to it's like a medicine. So then I can settle the vata, and immediately the mind clears. Immediately I go, wow, what was all this about? But when I don't practice regularly, I can easily drop back into those. Faculty of thinking is so strong that the repetition of the practice, for me, the consistency has become really a mental health aid.
Yeah, yeah, but of course, what you're talking about is more than a mental health aid, isn't it? Like because
Yes.
when you sort of discuss the apana vayu and how if you were to clear and clarify that, then when you sit like cross-legged on the floor or maybe like kneeling or even on a chair, you can sense this connection to the earth, this connection to the earth that you feel through the weight in your body pressing down, and that does clear the mind. And I think this is something that people sometimes miss with the yoga thing because they're like, okay, so you move, you breathe, you meditate when you're moving somehow. But like it's actually when you come to sit, you see the fruits of the practice, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. And ultimately, that is the sitting for me has priority. If I sit, it's the postures really prepare my body to clear the channels. It's a bit like brushing teeth. If I do all that in the morning, then I feel nice and clean and fresh. And I feel that same with the postures. Sometimes I just do a few standing postures and then I sit, and it still helps my sitting. It just helps those stages of the mind to move into absorption, so that or that from scattered mind to focused mind, and to synchronize movement and breath always, is the entry point for a sitting practice for me that I prefer.
Yeah, I mean, well, maybe you can help me with something, a conundrum I have about that, where um, it's because I really like Ashtanga and I like to work hard, and because that's part of it for me, like the advanced poses focus my mind, and there's the strength and stuff, and I like to do that. But then if you do like an average Ashtanga practice, you don't always have the energy to sit like for a decent meditation afterwards, right? So often I'll meditate before I do my practice, which is fine. Um, but then, some yoga teachers, some advanced yoga teachers will say, well, just do less asana, and then you'll sit, and then, you should just do that. But I don't know if it's a clinging or grasping that I have that I don't want to give up on the harder, longer practice, you know. Have you ever sort of thought about that or negotiated that?
Yes. So over the years, I'm quite a creative mind. So I'm not naturally the most structured person. So for me, I prefer those days, yeah, where I may not do a full practice. I still prefer to dedicate a lot of time for the postures. Um, and sometimes I let them slow down so much that it almost becomes a yin practice, that I have to um, converse with my mind. What do I need? And that's been really important for me to sustain the practice through, in my teenage years, I had different energy. Then I had, 3 pregnancies after now this menopausal years. So the body's moved through so many changes, and I feel that I need to have that. And I allow myself that now, that I don't have that expectations that it has to be rigid. But when I allow the soft entry point of not having too much of a plan, even then I can much more enjoy and surrender to my practice. And I also try to practice with the Sangha, with the community, once or twice a week, because it really helps me, um, just the energy of us all coming together and chipping away. I always feel the whole room is chipping away, and that is so inspirational to have co-practitioners with that mind state. But at home, I also really I now, it took me many years to have a self practice, to be able to sustain a self practice at home. And now that is, it's really a very open conversation, but I do show up, and I now really love that. It's like a deep friendship that I have with it. And if we just want to have a cup of tea, or I want to roll around a little bit, or I've bought a few bolsters recently, because sometimes I just like to, even in the deeper postures, to hang out a bit and explore the sensations and let the breath caress the tissues. For me, that's the only way not to spook my body, because when I had these ideas in early years, oh, I do Mondays primary, Tuesdays intermediate, thirds, and it can work, but it has to work with a really soft approach for me, not with an imposing approach that comes from the outside that imposes on my body. I have to allow my body to basically agree to this schedule.
Yes, yeah. That's very wise. That's very cool. I mean, it's now I have slightly less time to practice than I did before. So what I'm doing is I'm still basically following the Ashtanga sequence, but I'm not sort of trying to do a whole series in a day. I'll just be like, okay, so today I've done, I would rather do, quality over quantity. So like 1/3 of a series. Maybe I'm staying longer in the poses, like you say, like breathing properly, rather than trying to jam myself through all the stuff. And then if that's as far as I get to, whatever. The next day I just pick it up from there and carry on, and that's been working okay so far.
Well, it comes back to this one breath. It only takes one breath to really clear and embody this moment. So if we miss that one breath, or if we are that one breath fully, then it doesn't, yeah, like you said, it's, if how do you feel after your practice, or how do you feel during your practice, or when you have that conversation with your body. I think that's quite a wise thing to do.
For
To always
sure. And
do this
the
checking.
other cool thing about it is like often the poses at the end of any given Ashtanga sequence are like less enjoyable because I'm tired at that point. But if I'm doing this kind of like starting from different points, then I get to enjoy them more, right? Like and so I get to like have a bit more fresh energy when I'm doing some of the later poses, for example, which is nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned some very legendary teachers that you were with, Derek and Radha, who were some of the first Ashtanga teachers in Europe. Obviously, Patabi Joyce. You were formerly married to Matthew Sweeney, who's been on the podcast. So, I mean, what did your teachers emphasize most, do you think? And how did that shape your journey?
So my well, I would say my um how do you say, my um well, my teacher mainly was really Patabi Joyce, and then I yeah, most of these teachers I met in Mysore, so we were all students, and then I became a student of a teacher along the way. Um, Sorry, what was the question?
So, if your main teacher in your early days was Patabi Joyce,
Yeah.
what did he emphasize? What did he impart to you that shaped your
Okay.
journey?
Yes. So I started pretty much from scratch. And I'm not a very ambitious mind. So the way he was teaching was just in small increments. I think my practice was 20 minutes the first couple of weeks, just sun salutes. And then he would add on, and just that really that building up stamina. I wasn't very strong. Um, and I went with such a fresh mind that this sort of building of the sequence really worked well for me. It wasn't too, he didn't give too much. And then over the years, a lot of stamina just built itself. And Mark is very different. He's very,
So
he's very,
Mark's your just so people
Mark
know.
taught me,
Yeah, Mark's that's your current teacher.
my
Also,
current teacher.
yeah, also one of my teachers, and he's been on the podcast too as well. So
Oh,
you guys can
yes.
episode 3, I think. Yeah. Sorry,
Yes,
carry on.
I listened to that one. Yes.
Yeah.
And Mark really I met him at a point in my life after I hadn't been back to Mysore for a while and had my children. And I think I just sort of surrendered to be doing intermediate every day. It was sort of my practice. It became fairly accessible to my body and agreeable. And then I met Mark, and Mark just took my practice and had this belief, confidence, and vision for my body. And without him, I would have never trusted my body to be able to continue to explore all those sequences. And it wasn't, again, it was more than, it was having this teacher that teaches me how to reparent my mind, to be a really confident parent to my body, of going, I can do this. And that was probably is the biggest gift that Mark has given me over the years, because I kind of thought, I hadn't been back to Mysore and I'm just going to keep working with the repetition, and I was quite happy with it. And my confidence level wasn't really challenged. And I think it's been such a gift to be challenged, but also that someone believing in the possibilities. And so this is for me still an ongoing journey.
Okay.
With
So
his support.
So going back to Pattabhi Joyce, did he like alter or change the sequence for your particular body in any way? Because you mentioned you weren't very strong, so that reminds me of, like, maybe he made some adjustments for you in the order of the poses.
He did not in a way that he was very gentle with me. He never pushed me. I experienced his teaching as extremely compassionate and gentle, and the way he encompassed this, again, for me it was always a very challenging journey of emotions that came up. Or I did a lot of crying when I started practicing, and I felt he was very supportive. I witnessed him being much more harsh to some other peoples, or telling them off or slowing down, but for me, I felt like he was just offering me the kindness and the gentleness that I needed to build that trust with my body and the method.
Right. So the actual sequence of poses, he didn't alter that. It was more just the way he
No,
taught.
he didn't. He also, now I remember, I have a few photos, he did give strong adjustments, very strong adjustments at times. He didn't alter it. He moved me also beyond, like, all the back bends, all that holding knees. And I was rather flexible than strong. So taking me into these strong back bends really came from a lot of his force at the time, because my body wasn't that strong, just fairly open in some areas. But I felt extremely safe with it. And no, he did not alter anything. I think he did, after, when I did intermediate with him, I think he slowed me down a little bit. So he let me build strength, because I could perform all the postures to its sort of, satisfactory outcome. But my internal strength had to build the bandhas, all that understanding of really using the core. And so I was basically left, when I left Mysore and I didn't return for the long time, I was left with my intermediate sequence. I hadn't really I don't think I started, or maybe he showed me the first two postures of thirds after I left, and then he passed away and I never went back with him. And then I had David Roche as my yoga teacher for a while. I was living in Adelaide, and he became the godfather of my son, Noah. Noah Gabriel. He gave him his middle name, Gabriel, because I was practicing with David in my pregnancy with Noah. And that was very, again, he was very specific. David Rose's teaching were very specific. And at the time, that was also very helpful, because I always was quite, I think I was ready to receive a few more details that I could translate and understand. And then when I left,
So I mean, with your, I'm just wondering, how did Pattabhi Joyce teach you bandhas then? Like, what was, because there's such a sort of, because on the one hand, bandhas are just, it's kind of a way to hold your spine in a way that is good for the energetics of the body on the one hand, and on the other hand, they're basically the core technique of pranayama and mudra in a way that allows you to like transcend your body or whatever it is that happens when you
Yeah,
go
it's,
into
it's
a
like a
combustion.
containment of energy, the
Yeah.
containment of energy. And I don't think if he taught it to me, I would have understood it at the time properly. Um, but his English wasn't very good. So he didn't teach me in words. I feel like through showing up every day and really reaffirming the importance of showing up every day. And he'd always, if you take a day off, he'd ask you why, and or oh, I'm sore, and then he'd laugh, and he would just encourage kindly to just really show up every day, show up stretch. I cannot say I discovered, I mean, even the word bandhas, I don't often use it even, but it's a containment of energy that more and more from the external moving extremities, which I still did in my first few years, to more guiding the posture from an internal containment. And again, I feel it's an ongoing process. Every posture deepens. Yeah, I'm still deepening that understanding. So to a degree, I always feel like I'm starting again on my mat every day in the same state of, let's see what I understand today. And those small understandings that weave in, it's like, they keep me going. They are so invigorating when I make a new connection, and it can be very subtle sometimes. So that's sort of my journey. I feel like I'm still building connections, and the experience of that there's a vast space that holds me and supports me, and it's deep peace that is sort of, from having tastes of that, allows me to keep moving. So I feel like there's constant clearing. So when I clear one knot, internal knot, and some knots really have cleared over the years, then I touch a new knot, and so on.
Right. So, can you think of like any specific pose that like you've had that experience with recently, where you've sort of felt some energetics changing, and how did that happen?
Yes. So for example, the back bends. Sometimes I also think, oh, those deep back bends there, or this discussion I've heard, do we need to do these advanced postures? I'm 53 now, do I need to do them? But absolutely, for me, it's so clearing that I'm still moving through layers that I didn't, was not able to access in my 20s. And it's this constant, deepening. So this whole internal channel, I feel there is, when I breathe really deeply, then prana can accumulate in my heart center, and then it can open up. And this opening up, there's around the throat, and sometimes there's knots, there's fear. I can feel it come on before I move into the pose, and having cultivated this deep trust that it's okay to touch that fear and move anyway with it. And sometimes it's 3 little breaths that I can take in a deep posture, but then I have the confidence I've touched it, and then I move again, and I move again, and eventually this is how I clear. And afterwards there's this freedom. It's such a feeling of internal freedom that I find very sometimes I cannot access that without the postures.
So, when you say moving through layers, like layers of what?
Okay, yes, the layers of feelings, of um, sensations, but it's not the sensations alone, it's the depth. It's my patterns that I hold in my body that I sort of comb with I comb through my layers of tissues and holding patterns. So I'm touching another pattern. I'm touching another way how I usually divert from a sensation that we may call discomfort. And because if I don't shine light on it, I'll do it quite sort of in life. Something happens and I go, oops, suddenly I'm already doing something else. I didn't even feel what moved me to divert. But with the posture, it becomes so, I can really move to these points in my body where I can feel my tissues holding and explore that, saying, can I hold this resistance for a moment? Can I find ways to allow it with a bit more compassion? And is something changing through my awareness to hold this resistance? And then the tissues do respond. There's definitely a response in where tissues meet awareness. And
that's really cool, because I think that's a great description, because I mean what you're pointing to is the like greed and aversion, which is like the core issue, the core defilement, they say in Buddhism. It's like greed, aversion, and ignorance, and you're working with it in your body, right? So like if in your body you feel discomfort, you get aversion, and then you change your position. Like we change our positions like every however many dozens of times in a minute or something, right? But when you're in a posture, as you rightly point out, you're holding that posture, so you have to face those difficulties, and coming to a place of equanimity and spaciousness is such an important part of contemplative practice, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah. So I see the mat a bit like the laboratory of caressing through my afflictions.
The idea of looking at your afflictions in the sort of container of the asana, and coming to equanimity, that's a very sort of cool result of the practice. Do you think that's something that is sort of naturally part of the Ashtanga package, or do you think it's something that really needs to be emphasized by a teacher? I mean, because my own personal sense is that as a meditator, that makes perfect sense for me. But I sometimes wonder that if someone's never meditated and they're just doing Ashtanga, will they also? They probably will go through that process, but I don't know if it would be as refined as if it would be if they had been meditating a lot. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, I definitely think there's so many entry points into yoga through asana. Some people do it for social fields, others for losing weight, so every entry point is valid. But if the practice continues to be consistent, and I do think the right guidance, so it is important. I think we discover along the way naturally if our I'm just trying to look for the right word. I always had that search part in me that wanted to look deeply, so it was probably a part of my I was attracted to the aspect of the meditation in the moving this moving practice. But I found it very helpful to I like to teach people the steps that I would have liked to have been pointed out earlier, the drishti, the eye gaze, so we can stop looking into the outside world, to really allow the breath to establish the breath early on through the sun salutes. I think is a really important part of it, instead of just throwing yourself into these gymnastics kind of, and the mind also, yes, to guide the mind. I think the experiences, prana does its own thing. When prana is the seat of pranas in the heart, and it'll access its channels. And there is this beautiful Ayurvedic treatment, which I find is the sister science of the yoga, the navel, the Nabi massage, where oil is poured in the navel, and the navel has the natural intelligence to guide the oil into the channels that have dried out. So it's that intelligence, like when the baby is born and the connection to the mom, where all the nutriment is coming through. And I think our body has this, it knows, our knowing is already in our body. So it can come spontaneously in practice. When the mind gets absorbed spontaneously, these experiences happen. No one can make it happen for you. But I appreciate the setting the space. I don't I don't need entertainment for my practice or wild music, or it helps to establish the entry points of closing the sense doors and inverting the attention. And if that's pointed out, it's definitely a helpful step for the practice.
Yeah, definitely. So one interesting thing about Mark's teaching is what you find is that you sort of, as people get older, the expectation is that they do less asanas, right? But Mark's very different because I don't know how old he is. He's about 54 or something, isn't he? Something
Yes,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's still adding poses. So he's into sixth series now, and like that's.
So he's teaching what he's practicing. So this deep understanding really, he can translate it very well in what he's teaching.
Well, yeah, for sure. It's just that, I mean, I'm just saying the typical kind of expectation or idea is that like as you age, you should be doing like less very advanced poses, right? So what is, but you're obviously still doing the advanced poses, right? And you mentioned maybe you're still adding poses, like, learning new things, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what would you say to someone who takes that sort of attitude or position that like, okay, you're getting older, maybe you should be toning it down? And one thing that actually annoys me a little bit is when people kind of go, why do you need the advanced poses? You can get everything you need from your marriage asana A. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like I think advanced poses have their own magic, and I don't think I can get it all from Marriage Asana A. Sorry.
Well, in this particular method, and I'm sure there's other methods, but this is the method that I've explored, the Ashtanga method. I personally have still feel that the asana is vital to my practice, my sitting practice, my practice as I guess as a householder and raising kids. It's a grinding practice to raise kids. Every day you get faced with your own patterns that you're translating on other humans, and you're really it's grinding every day. And I feel the practice of asana has really been the greatest help of transforming my parenting into something that becomes my own inner path. So I think no one is too old to start a yoga practice at any age. It's not about imposing something impossible, but definitely touching our resistances, not just in the body, but how the mind relates to this I find, it's almost that point of liberation. So to move into the discomfort, or not not to move to that to that note where you feel something is now directing you away from it or diverting from it, and then exploring that. So we are constantly healing patterns of response to most often the discomfort. And even a craving is a discomfort. If you're always craving something pleasant, that becomes a discomfort. So exploring that is for me is a tool to freedom. And because I've had the taste of it so many times, I keep practicing in that manner, that I keep looking to touch something new. And through postures, it's possible. I'm not saying it's the only way, but it's a practiced way that I can say it's possible to to touch something new that through deep concentration. And I'm certain that, you know, when I go on those zazen retreats and you sit for long hours, it's a bit the same. It's a very deep touching of something that you usually wouldn't sit with in your day-to-day life, because the sitting may not last that long.
So, which series are you practicing?
Well, Mark is teaching me and Mary. I don't know if you met Mary.
Yeah.
She's an inspiration for me as well. We practice, and he's he started me on 6th, and so when I come and practice at Mark's, he always, you know, I often go, what shall I practice? And often he will choose, if I'm not sure what my body needs, he'll choose something that's either more challenging, what I anticipated, what I was going to practice. And I trust a lot his support. I trusted a lot, and the support of the Sangha. But sometimes when in my life there's a lot going on, sometimes 3rd series is more stabilizing for my mind. But yeah, so he's teaching me all the advanced, you know, the 4th, 5th, and 6th series.
So like, I'm learning 5th series with him, but like I'm only on the first, say, 25% to 30%. Yeah, what was your sort of experience with that? Because I don't know. I think it's just a lot of fun. Personally, it's way more fun than 3rd and 4th, because there's a lot more handstands, a lot more interesting back bends, more interesting stuff. I don't know. I mean, when I started 4th series, I was kind of intimidated. I thought it would be like ridiculously hard, but actually, I think 3rd series to this day is still the most challenging series for me. Like, just 3rd series brutalized me, put me through the ringer, probably did me a lot of good. But to this day, and I still practice it quite a lot, I think maybe like yourself, it is very stabilizing for me. And it's something that I come back to again and again. And weirdly, it's the series I think I need the most improvement on. Whereas 4th series was just like, oh, la di da, doing 4th series, okay, finish. I don't know. I don't know if that sounds weird, but what was your experience?
Yeah, well, I agree. For me, you know, 3rd series is all that upper body strength. I always sort of, it's probably was my most resisted series, but now I know that the it's like the aftertaste, the medicine of it will clear my mind in a certain way, so that I've now come to embrace it and almost love it. But yes, there is definitely that aspect. I think that all the postures, they have the similar seat. It's just allows a deeper understanding how to compress and how to direct prana to really move, allow it to circulate in a natural way. So I feel like all the postures are just compressing more.
Like ringing you out or something?
It makes sense. It all makes sense. It's just like, oh yeah, of course, now this can deepen and this can clear, and all the, you know, kapotasana in the first year of yoga, or a couple of years, whenever you learn it, it's a very confronting posture. But then in, you know, in 5th series, a few opening, and then 6th again, this is where I said the line that of the spine keeps finding little knots and clearing it, so that again I kind of come to love it all. I love now my struggles more than ever. I don't need things to just be easy anymore. You know, I'm not looking for experience something easy. I'm looking to experience, to move beyond what my limited mind, my ever limited mind, can understand.
Yeah, I get it. I think so. It's this. What you're saying is that as the postures get more advanced, the sensations sort of you're sort of releasing more because you're coming up with more and more types of aversions and cravings that you didn't sense before, right?
Um, since before, uh, I think my mind. Yeah, sometimes I feel like I start again. It's sometimes prana takes over, and I have to practice where it's almost get that, where the practice is practicing you. I'm not the laborer of the practice. And other days I arrive and I feel like, oh, I have to do the labor of it. And afterwards I often feel the similar release. But yeah, it's hard to say that it's always an upward climbing ladder, but definitely the consistency to show up to my own self has softened. And I think there's more compassion, and I just get so inspired because I don't watch myself practice. I feel myself practice, but I just see so much transformation in the room sometimes that also inspires me so deeply. That Yeah, I think the advanced postures is hard to describe, but it's just it's a natural movement. I think that now feels appropriate. I don't Yeah, I think it's appropriate to keep challenging those postures or to keep learning new postures. For me, it's a lot of the strength, a lot of the lowering down and all that sort of strength stuff is definitely more challenging. But over years, my body has built a natural strength. My spine has become strong. And there's still so much improvement and so much imperfection, but it's not about perfecting my practice, about, yeah, hopefully growing into this, my capacity to meet life, to meet my body, to meet myself, and to live a more wholesome, directed life. I think
Well,
that's what
yeah, I
it
mean,
helps me with.
it definitely inspired me because I know you put on your Instagram. There's one of the first few poses of this series, and is it like Krakatasana? I can't remember. I'm not so familiar with the names, but it's you're doing front splits and then you go into a back bend.
Oh,
What's the correct
yes.
name? Do you know?
I also don't know it.
Yeah, it's something like I don't know. We're not doing too well on
Yeah.
that. Sorry, everybody. But yeah. But anyway, like obviously I'm not going back and grabbing my leg at this stage, but you were using like a little
Oh,
dumbbell.
wait. Yeah,
Yeah, and I
yeah.
went out and got me one, like a little 3 kg, and I'm holding that. It's very helpful actually because it allows me to find a place where I can breathe in a way that isn't completely terrifying. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Whereas
Yep.
and so you have a lot more control, right?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
I've played a lot with that posture because, again, it's very confronting to my emotional body.
Yeah, me too.
And just recently, again, I was reminded by Mark that all the work lies in the legs of that posture, to actually not so much, like have someone push you down, or just to really work the legs. So then when the legs work strongly, they really draw and down into the earth, like grow their roots, then the chest becomes so much lighter, the breath can go so much deeper, and then the possibility for movement is so much greater. So again, it lies all in the understanding of where to move, where to ground deep, so that the chest can fly high. I always say the deeper I ground, the more space comes in the chest, in the heart. And when prana is so full, then there's so much more movement that allows to come. So I always try to explore it from all sides. So with the weight, that was an exploration that really helped me opening some of my arms. But now I've come back to working more on the legs in order to feel that freedom of movement in the upper body.
Right. Yeah. And so what's your practice week? I mean, I know like you don't have like a kind of set idea or sequence, right? But I mean, I think that's something that actually I sort of struggle with now that, you know, I have a lot of sequences, right? And then
Yeah.
you just sort of you have sort of limited time, and like let's say I want to work on fifth a couple of days, and then you start like I start to worry a little bit, like, oh man, am I gonna like my capitasana has gone way downhill because I don't do it that much anymore. I used to be able to just go back and grab my heels. Now I'm walking in more. So yeah, I know we don't need to keep up anything. Like I agree with you on that. But just in terms of like scheduling, do you ever think about that, or are you very much just in the moment? I do what I
No,
feel I
no,
should
I
do.
do. I do schedule a little bit. So on Tuesdays and Fridays, I usually practice with the Sangha, and then I'm encouraged to do my more advanced sequences. And often, Mark has encourages to do two sequences, or 1.5 is sort of my limit. I often say, oh, that's enough sometimes, because again, he'll challenge me to do more. But so Tuesdays and Fridays, and I do my more advanced sequences, and then often I have, I do the thirds and seconds come without resistance at the moment in my life. So I put them in the week myself. And then I do some, sort of free exploration where I group a few postures together that I find. So I pick a few postures from different sequences on Sundays, but they're all basically with the same intelligence that I understand the Ashtanga to be. So I always start with standing postures, and then the twists. I just pick the twist that I prefer, if it's Marichasana, Bay, or the third series twist, or I just sort of pick them as my body goes. So I compose it. But yeah, I sort of have a sequence week where I keep my practice up.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense for sure. Um, yeah. So, you recently just became a grandmother, so
Yeah,
congratulations.
thank
Um,
you.
so how did motherhood and now grandmotherhood, how did that affect your practice?
Um, well, I have to say that probably the biggest, what affected my first affection of parenthood to my practice was pregnancy. And after pregnancy, I felt my whole internal body was much more aware, much more awake. So I became much stronger after my pregnancies than I ever was before I had children. Um, Now with the grandbaby, oh, it's so cute. He's only 3 weeks old, so I carry him in the pouch, and I realized how much the body, how much physical body is needed for a mom. I mean, watching my daughter give birth was just out of this world. I felt like I disappeared and came back as no one. It was so hard to watch this body move, to turn itself inside out, and it was just, yeah, it's just remarkable what a woman's body. And that's where I, like, what the body is capable of, and what the body is capable of repairing as well. So yeah, emotionally, I thought before my grandchild was born, I love my children so much. I thought, how can I love another child so much? But the heart just keeps getting bigger. And there is, yeah, and now it's all about letting go. I feel like my whole life is about, from the moment you give birth, you cut the cords, and now my children start moving into the world, or my oldest daughter already did. And it's a constant letting go. And some days I just arrive on my mat and I feel, I just feel the grief. And grief, when I have a lot of grief running through my system, I had a very a period in my life where I had a lot of grief. My body started getting achy, and when that happened, I responded to it. So my practice became very gentle in the time when I had my greatest grief. I lost my stepson, and it took me a year for my body to move through that really intense grief. And I feel like the practice was also there to respond to it. So I needed to move much slower. And yeah, and eventually the season of grief came back into spring, and then something changed, and this is how I feel even with my grandchild now. It's so it's just a new season of love, attachment, detachment. um it's like another pose. I think parenthood is just an amazing another sequence of postures that you can never really prepare for. You meet them, and it's very repetitious, and it goes very deep, and it really touches the prana, the center of prana in the heart. That's for sure.
Mm. So, you're sort of you're a grandmother. You're learning sixth series. So, like, what advice would you give to a Ashtanga practitioner or any kind of yoga meditation practitioner? They're sort of young parenthood. You've got like young children under 5. What sort of advice would you give them about this journey and their practice in relationship to that?
Well, if they already have a practice and they enjoy their practice, I think this is the greatest tool. It's the best tool to have a practice through parenthood and to prioritize it. I used to take my babies into the Shala in Adelaide with David, and my daughter came along and bounced the baby. But it was sort of it was the Sangha that supported it wherever I was, but also that moment to always make that oneself, to give that priority, because there's a lot of giving involved in parenting. So to fill the cup, to put back in, but also to shine the light, because we're such habitual beings. And when stress comes on, especially in parenting, then you don't want to keep dishing out your own stress. It was always for me a real the kids were always, the way I related to the kids really was mostly how I related with my own stress levels. So it was just a direct reflection how much patience I had with my kids and how much patience I could handle within myself. So the practice really sets an honest ground to do your best. You're never a perfect parent, but it just gives that nourishment for being sincere and doing the best you can, clearing ancestral lines, passing on, you know hopefully some seeds. All my kids have come to yoga. I take them all to Mark's classes on a Saturday, the lead classes, and and I feel it's a great gift, especially if they also hear it. If they see a whole community practicing and sitting in silence and sitting with themselves and not having to reach for alcohol or drugs, but to be really aware that this body can handle the challenges, and it can handle the pain, and its capacity for joy is also possible.
Mm. Yeah, that's good advice. Thank you. And um, yeah, I think, well, one thing that comes to mind is there are some. What do you think is the biggest misunderstanding that people today have about yoga?
Ashtanga yoga, especially,
Well,
sort of
it would
yoga and
whatever.
yoga, yeah. um well, I think it's yeah, well, my son-in-law, who hasn't done much yoga, I took him to a class on Saturday with Mark, and I really enjoyed what he said after. He said, "Oh, I really liked it." He said, because he wasn't being so spiritual, of going, oh, having this voice, putting on this special voice, and so it was very. There is a practical aspect to it, but I think often it becomes a bit theatrical in some cases. It can become, oh, we're also spiritual, but there's also the really raw reality that of just anyone is a yogi, really. Anyone who shines some awareness on their own, who can have some observation of themselves as a yogi. And it doesn't need to be wrapped up with very pretty bows or very special voices, or and I think yoga can have that a little bit, or pretty, some outfits, or it's very accessible and very simple. And sometimes I think it's presented sometimes a bit like a Christmas tree, and that can be yeah.
Yeah. So it's about like the grit and the practicality of the teaching that you're relating to.
Yeah, I think that's really what it should be, so that anyone could relate to it. Um, yeah,
Yeah, well, I agree, and Susie, let's we should probably wrap it up there. But so thanks so much for joining us.
okay. Oh,
Yeah,
thanks.
are you doing any teaching you'd like to mention, or
Well,
anything
I'm
people should know?
going. I'm going. So I've been the last 6 months. I've been helping in the Precious Om House in Bondi with Eileen Hall, and she's an amazing yogi as well, completely dedicated. So I lived with her for 6 months, and that was wonderful. So I'm teaching with her a workshop in Bali from the in July now in the Shala Bali, and I'm really looking forward to meet that community again, because what she's built at the Om House is a pretty special place for people, who live in a city, who can show up every day. And I was really impressed how that space has become such a place of refuge for many people in Bondi
Is
or
that
in
in?
Sydney.
Oh, it's in Sydney and Bondi.
It's in Bondi. Bondi is in Sydney. Sorry, it's on the coast.
Oh,
It's a
okay, because I
beach
thought
in
you meant.
Sydney. Yes.
Oh, of course, yeah. I was getting
Yeah.
confused. Of course, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, got it. Wow. Okay, great. Well, Susie, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Nathan.